The internet is a big,
amazing,
and complicated place.
It's made for people to build communities,
Create anything they can imagine,
and make connections across the world.
I'm Cassie Coccaro, Head of Communications at Thorn.
And I'm Pailes Halai, Senior Manager of Partnerships at Thorn, and this is Safe Space.
In these online spaces, thousands of people work behind the scenes
to protect the millions of users who access the web every day.
This is their story. On this podcast, we talk with trust and safety leaders and legends.
They share their journeys and what fuels their mission
to build a safer internet for all of us. Okay, Pailes, hi, how are you?
I'm great, Cassie. How are you?
Good. Well, we're back today. We are talking to someone who is really a connector in the trust and safety community. And I was just thinking about the trust and safety community and the fact that there is a lot of cohesiveness and togetherness within the community. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've only been part of this community for maybe 5 years, but that definitely resonates with me, yeah.
Yeah, well, we certainly can't work in silos in this difficult space. So our guest today, Alice Hunsberger, has spent over 16 years in trust and safety, which is basically a million years in trust and safety years. She's led teams at OkCupid, Grindr, Partner Hero before joining Musubi, where she is now. She leads trust and safety strategy at the intersection of AI and safety. She's a prolific writer and a community builder, and one of the most consistent voices advocating for the humans doing this work and sort of building that community that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think whether you're new to this industry or you've been around for a long time, chances are you know Alice, and if you don't, you should get to know her. So yeah, I'm really excited to dig into her thoughts today.
Welcome, Alice. We're so happy you're here today.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
We're so excited. So to get started, we always start the same way. We like to ask our guests to share what they wanted to be when they grew up. So tell us about little Alice. What did you think you would be doing as an adult when you were smaller?
I changed my mind all the time. I wanted to be a vet for a while. I wanted to run a restaurant. I wanted to be a writer. And in a roundabout way, I think I've accomplished that. It was always changing though, sort of depending on my whims at the time.
Yeah, I think that's totally normal. So my question is, you're definitely a writer. Have you ever worked in a restaurant and do you have pets?
I worked at a coffee shop. And I always have a side hustle, like no matter what. And I had a side hustle doing catering for neighbors for a while. And yes, I have a black lab as a pet.
Okay, so you kind of made all your dreams come true in a way.
plus some.
Totally. Well, that's awesome. Thank you again for being here. I kind of want to dive into the conversation now and talk about how you got here into this trust and safety world. You've said to us that you fell into trust and safety sort of by accident. I think your roots were in community building and you've always been a helper, I think, is how I've heard you describe yourself. So that seems to be somewhat of a common origin story in this field. But talk to us about the moment where you got into this field, the moment that sort of you were like, okay, I'm in trust and safety now.
The preamble to being officially in trust and safety was when I was in college, which is 20-something years ago now because I'm very old. I had a little DIY message board. This is before Facebook, before MySpace even, before any real social media. And I learned really fast when I had this message board is you have to have community guidelines, you have to have governance structures, you have to have means of enforcement. And so I got a crash course in online community management way back then. And it was actually like pretty traumatic and horrible. And I was like, I'm never doing this again. And my degree was in documentary filmmaking. And I was a documentary editor, worked in film and TV for many years. And then in 2009, there was a recession and nobody was making documentaries anymore. And I was a gig worker, waiting for the next film to pop up. And so I was looking for regular work to pay the bills. And I happened to know one of the founders of OkCupid. And he needed content moderators to find romance scammers. And so I was hired. I had as much experience as anybody at the time because I'd been doing this community management on my own for many years and kind of knew the basics. And so, yeah, that's how I got started in tech. It was not called Trust and Safety. I didn't know that Trust and Safety was a thing. It didn't occur to me that you could do this professionally. It was many, many years, I think, until I really realized, oh, this is what I do now. But yeah, it was that was how I entered.
Yeah, what was that first experience like? Just you're like, okay, now I'm here looking for romance scammers. That feels like something new, even though you were kind of doing community management before
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah, it was so funny. It was a 20-person company at the time. It was really small. There's no full-time safety people really. I got trained by one of the engineers who had built the tool. And every couple minutes I would go to him and I'd be like, "This looks weird. Is this a scammer?" And he'd be like, "Oh yeah, like, here's the tell." But it was very unstructured onboarding, I would say, and I just had to figure it out and get intuitive about it, and that is just like so different from how things are today. But it was, yeah, I mean, romance scammers at the time too were like very obvious. It wasn't very sophisticated. The profiles were like, literally, I'm a prince in Nigeria, and nobody knew the Nigerian prince scam was like a scam yet,
Right. It
And
wasn't
so
a trope like it is now.
yeah, they could
Totally.
get away with literally saying that. That's where it came from. And so yeah, those were the simple old days.
Yeah, I never thought about trust and safety as detective work, but that's sort of what I was getting from when you were talking about that. I want to get a little bit more into your trust and safety life right now, but once you realized you were in the trust and safety world, what has kept you in it?
I think two things. I think one is just feeling like I'm helping people and making the world a better place. I've always cared about making the world a better place and wanting to feel like my actions make a difference, and trust and safety work definitely does that. I think the other is it changes so fast between the technology that's available, dealing with adversarial, problems that change constantly, the way that tech companies change and grow really quickly, the way that social norms and expectations of online spaces changes. Now we have regulation that changes also very quickly. And so it's never the same. I feel like every year I have a new job, even if I literally am at the same company with the same title. The world around me changes so much that it's constantly adapting, and that keeps my brain engaged and excited.
Yeah, that is very cool. And we're going to talk about it in a little while. But I think the way that you're a connector and sort of sharing information out into the world is one of the ways that and I know a lot of people who are more hands on trust and safety practitioners, kind of stay up to date on these things. So you're also contributing to that knowledge. So that's really awesome. It is fast moving. So I want to talk a little bit about your time in trust and safety and get a little into that right now. So you have led trust and safety teams at so many different places: OkCupid, Grindr, Partner Hero, now you're at Musubi. These are all so different and they have way different user bases and safety profiles, and I'm sure risks and considerations. So, what have you learned from each one that has sort of contributed to the trust and safety professional that you are now?
One of the coolest parts of my career, or one of the things that I'm appreciative of the most, is I've done so many different things. So, OkCupid and Grindr were both dating platforms. I was at dating platforms collectively for 13 years. So I know dating really, really well. But within dating, I was started out as a frontline moderator. So I've done that frontline work. I then managed those teams. Then managed managers. I did a ton of policy work. I did a lot of product strategy work when I was at Grindr. I was also doing a lot around like GDPR and other kinds of compliance things. I did a lot with machine learning in the early days, sort of starting to automate trust and safety and use technology to do trust and safety stuff at scale. Then at Partner Hero, I managed outsourced teams Whereas like at OkCupid and Grindr, I was managing outsourced teams from the inside of the platform. I saw how it was from the other side. Now at Musubi, we're building AI tools for trust and safety teams. So I get to see that vendor side, again, from the vendor point of view. So I feel like I've done pretty much literally every job there is to do in trust and safety. Like done product, I've done a lot of engineering related things, policy, operations, vendor stuff. So it's given me this really, really broad perspective. And then especially the last few years as I've been on the vendor side of things, I've worked with many, many, many companies across the industry. And that was an intentional choice on my part. I was like, I've been doing dating for 13 years. Now I want to like broaden my scope as much as possible across the industries. So I have this like very interesting mix of kind of having seen it all. If I have not done it all. And I think that gives me an appreciation for how hard trust and safety is. Like I say this sort of flippantly, like I've done everything, and I don't want it to seem like it's easy to do everything. I think it's given me the appreciation that every single job is hard in a different way. But the sort of way that my brain works, or the ways that I find myself succeeding the most, are connecting things. And you sort of mentioned that a little bit, Cassie. I like to be a connector in the community, but I also am always a connector at the companies that I work with. And I'm often the person who's translating between engineers and policy people, or between executives and regulators, or, whatever, BPOs and frontline internal moderators, or whatever else. I'm always the person who's kind of translating between them. And so, finding myself in jobs where I'm able to do that and have that flexibility, I think has given me an appreciation for all the people who stick in one lane and do it really, really well. It's so hard.
Yeah, Alice, I remember, I think the first time I met you was maybe around 5 years ago when you were at Grindr. And I had just kind of entered the trust and safety field, and I was learning so much working with trust and safety practitioners. And it struck me even back then, like how much knowledge you had and how in depth it was, because you were talking about red teaming and A/B testing, moderation scenarios even back then. And it's only really kind of hitting me now that it's because, not just because of how long you've been doing this work, but because of the kind of different roles and different hats you've worn. And that's kind of why you were looking at it so holistically, which at the time was surprising to me, but now it just makes so much sense.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I try to think. I try to think holistically, and I try to look at things from different perspectives. And I think that's what makes me good at trust and safety, is like looking at different perspectives internally at a company about how you can do things, or, as a vendor, sort of helping come up with solutions. But then also when you're thinking about putting yourself in the shoes of your users, if you're at a platform, or, what role your platform has to play in the greater tech ecosystem of online safety in general, and making the internet a place that people want to go. It all kind of requires looking at things from different angles.
So if you listening or watching this are not subscribed to Everything in Moderation, I think that is one of the most educational, informative, prolific trust and safety publications out there right now. It's published so regularly. I can't believe how often you guys come out with it. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that has done for you, and what that has done for the community?
Yeah. So Ben Whitelaw, my friend, started Everything in Moderation years and years and years ago, and did it. Does it every week. He does a news roundup about what's happening in trust and safety. And his background is he was a journalist, and he was tasked with content moderation on the comment section of the newspaper online. And so he had like no trust and safety background, but was sort of like, at a newspaper, let's figure out how to make this comment section work, and became so fascinated with trust and safety. He's like, I'm going to write about trust and safety and like give people the resources that I wish that I had, which is very much my attitude towards things. And then when I was at Grindr, I was basically sort of pushed into the spotlight a little bit by our comms team. The company was getting ready to go public. I had been overhauling all the safety systems under a new leadership team. And so we had a lot to say about how things are better. And we thought that was a good story going leading up to going public. And so I started writing a lot. And as I started writing a lot, I was like, oh, I have a lot of things to say. Like, I have more to say than I thought that I did. And a lot of it is like really nerdy and technical and not for like a public comms perspective, but like I have things to say for trust and safety people. And so I started kind of putting feelers out and joking and being like, oh, I should do a newsletter or something. And then contacted me and was like, please do it with me. Like, don't go starting on your own thing. Like, let's collaborate. And I always think collaboration is so much better than doing things alone. And Ben has made me such a better writer. He's a great editor. He holds me accountable. And so almost every week I get something out. Plus, I also write a lot for whatever company I'm working for. So at Musubi, I have a blog. When I was a partner here, I had a blog. So I think I wrote like 60 articles last year. It was crazy. It was like more than one a week. And yeah, I still have more to say. I'm not done.
Everybody wants to hear it, so keep saying it. I feel like Alice from Everything in Moderation is one of my most frequent people in my inbox. So
yeah, I mean, it's really nice for me. I would recommend, a couple things if anybody's listening and thinking about doing this. Like, I was pushed into starting to speak publicly, and once I started to do that, I saw that it resonated with people, and that was the encouragement that I needed. I didn't start feeling confident in my own writing and the things that I said. I needed, my like grinder BFF, who is a comms person, to like push me forward into the world. And so, I think a lot of people feel stuck and they feel like they don't have things to say because they haven't had that encouragement. And I would say, like, you definitely have things to say, especially, people, I think, get hung up on thinking that they have to have done everything or have a really long career in order to feel like they're an expert. But honestly, I find a lot of people want to read things from somebody who is just a couple of years ahead of them. So, if you've been doing trust and safety for 5 years, there's somebody who just started this year who, like, your advice is going to be much more relevant than mine. Like, I've been doing this for 20 years. My advice is probably not that helpful for somebody who just started yesterday. Like, my experience is so different. And so there's room for so many more different voices in the space for sure.
Well, that is amazing. And you're also making me think, as a comms person at Thorn, I need to continue to push people to share their perspective. So that's, us comms people are not so bad,
Mm-hmm.
No, that's really great. And I know that it resonates with everybody. The last thing I wanted to ask you, well, I won't say that, but another thing I wanted to ask you, and I'm probably going to botch this because it was my first TrustCon 2 years ago. I hadn't been before, and I met you when you were doing that project where you're taking input from everybody at the conference, almost into like a journal style contribution. I was just wondering if you could talk a little about that too, because I feel like that was really such a beautiful underlying moment of connection throughout that TrustCon. But I was new and overwhelmed, so I would love to hear a little bit more about it.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite projects that I feel like didn't get as much love as I hoped that it would. So I love that you brought that up. Okay, it was a zine project. Zine is in like shorthand for magazine, but I was a punk rock teenager, for anybody who would not have guessed by my millions of tattoos. And when I was a teenager in the 90s, we would do these zines, and you would just like write about whatever political stuff and do little music reviews and print them on a Xerox printer and mail them out around the country. And, this is like the internet, like social media did not exist. So this is how you found your people and communicated with other people, is through these zines. And I did a million of them when I was a teenager. And so I thought it would be really cool to do that for the trust and safety community and have something that is like for us, by us, in our own voices, encouraging each other in a very raw, authentic, unedited way. I feel like LinkedIn can be really great in so many ways, and people also are wanting to be very professional and be very polished, and it's difficult. And so I was like, oh, if this is sort of anonymous space where you don't have to write your name if you don't want to, and you can just say whatever you need. And I think the prompt was something like, what would you say to, encourage other people in trust and safety? Or what is the message that you wish that you had heard from somebody else? It was something like that. So then we just collected a bunch of responses. At TrustCon, I had a little table with a bunch of Post-it notes and postcards and stuff that people could write on, and a little Instax camera where you could take pictures and put them all together. And I did a digital zine, not a printout, because it's hard. Like, I wasn't going to mail hundreds around the country. So we just did like a little PDF of everything, but it was like very old school style. And yeah, it was really fun. It was like a fun personal project.
Yeah, that was very cool. Maybe we can, if it still lives, I'm assuming, online, maybe we can link to it.
Yeah, I'll find it. I'll find the link.
A safer internet doesn't happen by accident. It takes dedicated people and purpose-built solutions. That's where Safer by Thorn comes in. Built by child safety technology experts using predictive AI and proprietary hash matching, Safer helps detect child sexual abuse material and exploitation at scale. Platforms like Blue Sky, Stability AI, and Vimeo rely on Safer to proactively detect online sexual harms against children. Want to learn how you can put Safer to work on your platform? Visit safer.io.
Alice, a lot of what I'm hearing about kind of your background in this space to where you are today is so much about spending the time learning about the job and learning about different roles and just learning about the space in general and how these practices affect not only practitioners but also users. And now you're kind of at this really nice spot in your journey where you're able to communicate that, whether that's through your writing, whether that's through your various roles. So really, I'm really happy that you're here to kind of share that knowledge and pass that on through conversation and through your writing. So one of the things that we at Thorn have been thinking about a lot, and as we build these tools, is bias. And it's something that you recently wrote a comprehensive piece about, which is just bias in content moderation. So I just wanted to ask you a few questions about that, really. I'm sure it's on your mind as much as it is ours. So give us the 60-second version. What does bias in a moderation system look like, and why does it matter?
It's going to be hard to get me to say anything in 60 seconds,
We'll
especially
start with
something as
60.
complicated as this, but I will give it a try. Basically, like, humans are biased. They come with their own cultural assumptions. They come with their own separate experiences. They come maybe even with different assumptions about what training might mean. And so any human in a moderation system is going to have some amount of bias, and it can show up as bias against a certain group of people, which is what people often assume. But, another bias is like, what languages do your moderators speak? And you have a biased system if your moderators only speak one language. It's biased against the other languages because you don't have as many resources. So there's many different ways that it can show up. And then machine learning models are trained on human labels. So if your people are biased, then they might create biased labels, and then your machine learning system might learn off of that. Similarly, large language models are trained off of human input, much more broad, but then that also introduces a much broader range of potential bias that could be brought in. So there's no system in moderation or trust and safety that does not have any kind of bias. Every single system will. And I think my point in writing this piece and sort of speaking about it in general is, if we know that every moderation system is biased, then it's our responsibility to try to do something about it, to mitigate that bias. And it's not like, oh, I found one tiny little piece and I fixed it. It's like an ongoing process because fundamentally, inherently, people are biased and we're dealing with people solving problems
Mhm.
with other people.
Yeah.
And so it's always going to be an issue.
Yeah. So I feel like so much of it is just about coming out and owning it, right? Accepting that this is just a norm of what we're building. What kind of ways do you see it actually manifests, like in real world examples in content moderation, and areas where it does get really, really tricky? I want to kind of just shine a light on how hard it is to moderate without bias and build systems without bias.
Yeah, I can give you a couple examples that I've seen personally, and there's many, many more that exist. So this is not at all comprehensive, but just an illustration. So, I'm aware of bias myself. I try to build systems that are as unbiased as possible. And I also make mistakes.
Mhm.
So I was writing a policy for Grindr. I was redoing the content moderation policy there. And I was reviewing a policy that we had on gore and violence. And we had gotten a lot of user complaints about people who had profile photos for hunting. Like it was somebody who had like gone deer hunting, and it was like picture of them with a dead deer. And so there were complaints about it. And I've been vegetarian since I was a child. I was raised as a Buddhist. And so I was like, yeah, like get those hunting pictures out of there. Like this is a dating app. We don't need blood. We don't need dead animals. Like that is not the vibe that we are going for. So I wrote in the policy, like, no dead animals or something like that. Then when I was getting ready to finalize the policies, I did a peer review. So I had some friends of mine who are at other platforms read the policies and give me feedback because I was a one-person policy team. So I had nobody internally who I could share it with. And very kindly, people took a look, and somebody was like, Alice, you know that there are like entire cultures in the United States, but also around the world, where hunting is like a thing that people do together to bond. It's culturally appropriate. It's seen as like a positive thing, and it's seen as a like marker of their culture, and that's why they put it on a dating profile, because they want to meet somebody who maybe does it too or agrees. And I was like, yes, obviously, now that you put it that way, I
Mm,
understand. But to me, I had this like very visceral, like, oh, dead animal reaction, and I didn't think about that not everybody has that reaction.
yeah.
Obviously, because they're trying to upload those pictures on a dating app.
Yeah.
So that was just like my own bias coming through. And that can be, everybody who does trust and safety is going to have something like that is their spot. Another example is I was working with a team to do machine learning, fixed machine learning model on hate speech. And I was looking at some of the model's responses, and I saw that it had flagged some super innocuous statements. And they were about people's religion and the country of origin. And specifically, it was sort of things like talking about like being a proud Muslim or being from Pakistan, or, and it was like flagging these as hateful. And I was like, what the heck? This is crazy. And I took a look at it, and it was like, because so many comments that were anti-Muslim and anti-immigrant had been flagged as hate speech, the machine learning model had extrapolated from that the key word that signified that those statements were bad was the identity of the person who the hate speech was against, not the actual hateful part. Because it's a machine learning model, it just picks up on patterns. And so then obviously we had to be like, that is not the pattern you were looking for. You were
Wow.
looking for the opposite of that pattern. And we fixed it, and it was totally fine. But, it just sort of shows, like, if you're not careful and you're not looking for those biases, like, your systems can sometimes do the opposite of what you're intending for them to do. And that's an easy mistake to make.
Yeah, it seems like in so many situations, it's just not intuitive. And this may seem like a silly question, but do you find yourself still learning like that? Um, just even though it's, you've been working on this for so long, I would imagine new things pop up that kind of occur to you in the situation.
Yeah, all the time. And, especially the last year or so, I've been working with LLMs really heavily. And that was something that I played around with a little bit over the last few years. But, have really been all day, every day, the last year or so. And so, yeah, it's so interesting to see what assumptions are made with LLMs interpreting policy and how you can steer them and sort of tell them what like what your definition of hateful is or what your definition of hate speech is. Has to be like much more precise than you would with a person, for example. But then the results that you get are also much more precise. And so the interesting thing about large language models is like the bias comes out from the model itself, but also from how you create instructions yourself. Like, what is the policy that you're giving? What are you leaving out of that policy that then the LLM has to fill the gaps in for? Like, that's where the bias creeps in. And that's definitely something that you didn't have to think about in the same way with ML models.
Yeah, I really love the first example you gave, because it's almost so mundane, right? Like you didn't sit there spending time ruminating um, whether this was morally acceptable or not. You just had a visceral reaction because of the way that you were raised and your experiences. But as soon as somebody explained to you that, well, that's not the case and this is culturally important, etc., you immediately are able to correct the error, right? And you're not necessarily tied to that decision. And I think that's a really good example for us to think about when we think about content moderation, that it's often mundane and it's often so easily corrected as well.
Yeah, there's endless improvements that can always be made to any system. And it's important to have those systems in place to be able to catch your own bias or the bias of the system that you've set up. I think that's the scariest thing, is when people think that they've set something up that is completely reasonable because it's reasonable to them, and they
Yeah.
don't have some kind of external check or balance on what they're doing. And so for me, like, I was a one-person policy team. Having that external commentary was so incredibly helpful. And that's like the takeaway for sure, is just don't ever rely on one person's judgment, because there will always be some edge case they didn't think of.
Right. And the hunting profile picture, let's take that one. That, to me, relatively low stakes. But again, that could be my bias showing. But I want to switch over to something a little bit more high stakes, and how bias shows up, systemic bias, moderate bias shows up on more high risk surfaces. So at Thorn, of course, our focus is on child safety. When it comes specifically to child safety or other high harm areas, what are things in this area that you worry about most? And are there contexts where these failures feel particularly consequential?
I mean, all of it is consequential, honestly. Like, I don't think there's anything in child safety that doesn't have really serious consequences. That's why it's the hardest and most important work that we do as trust and safety professionals. Certainly the hardest work that I've ever done. With bias, I think there's a few things. There's obviously the really careful balance between getting automation and human review right. And both have their own kinds of biases or gaps that the other can possibly fill, but making sure there's a lot of checks and balances there. I think One example that I can think of with bias and child safety work is obviously there are so many different cultural definitions of what does child mean, what does sexual mean, what is the age of consent, what is the cultural expectation of when a child is old enough to marry. Like there is, that line that we think of in, the United States, for example, seems very clear cut, but in other cultures, it's different. And so when you're thinking about child safety and you're thinking about child safety norms, like there's all sorts of things there. And then language is another really big one.
Hmm.
I think when people think of child safety, they often think of images. And of course, that's some of the hardest content to review and to see just on an emotional level. But grooming is another really big issue in
Hmm.
child safety, and that's in text often or in spoken language. Making sure that if you're reviewing for grooming, that it's not just in one language, like
Yeah.
and how, and not only the language, but like how do people speak about it? Like what are the ways that people groom? It will be different depending on every culture, and it will be different depending on every language. And
Yeah.
not having that full coverage, I think, is like another example of bias. So that's where I worry. I think LLMs are really helpful in coming a long way and allowing teams to have more language coverage than ever before. But I think that space still, there's a that can be done.
Yeah, bias. I feel like even just in this conversation, I'm kind of rethinking the way that I think about bias, because bias can feel like such a loaded word, like it's almost intentional. But the way that you're talking about it, it's so influenced just by norms, by cultural norms, and what is normal, right? Depending on where you're from, and what language you speak and how you think. So I feel like bias needs so much unpacking. So that, thanks for unpacking that here as well.
Yeah, it's such a good point. I think, yeah, people bias feels like a triggering term these days. It's like, like I'm not biased. Nobody on my team is biased. Like we're fair. We care about all humans. Like that is, what people want to say. But having gaps in your moderation system means that there will be some groups of people that are disproportionately affected by your moderation in different ways. And often that's marginalized people in one way or another. And that could be marginalized by their gender, their age, their language, their culture, their orientation. There's so many different variables that somebody can have a different experience than somebody else on a platform, and how your moderation system can treat those. And often, I think at this point, trust and safety has been around for so long. We have all the bases covered, like the major things. And so bias is often small little gaps that just like haven't been filled in yet. And so that doesn't feel like huge institutional on purpose bias. Like it doesn't feel like biased against a certain person on purpose. But to that person who has been affected by moderation systems that don't work as well for them as they do for other people, or that don't have the same accuracy rate for them as they might for other people,
Hmm.
that still feels like a system that is not working for you. And
Yeah.
that is bias.
Yeah, and that perspective is so much more forgiving to us as humans, but I think it makes moderating so much more complex because it is so nuanced.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's interesting.
With that in mind, then, what does a better system look like? Right? You already said the goal isn't a bias-free system, and there's a lot of talk about a kind of a moderator system that includes, a human and a machine. What does that look like to you? Like, what does a good human in the loop design actually look like in practice?
Again, I think there's as many different human in the loop
Mhm.
systems as there are systems themselves. It really should be super custom. I think that's the thing that I learned the most in my career is every single platform has such different needs, such different users, different kinds of content, different contexts, different trade-offs that they need to make, and different decisions they need to make about what is safe or relatively low stakes to automate, what really needs careful review. I think one thing that I hear a lot from people that I want to push back on a little bit is people often say, well, AI is not as good at moderating as people are. And so human in the loop means like a person needs to check the automated system. I find in my work a lot, I make just as many mistakes. And I've been doing this stuff for a really long time. And I think really carefully and thoughtfully. And I still make mistakes. And often my mistakes can be caught by automated systems. And so I think the key for me is not necessarily AI does task A and a human does task B. It's having a system of checks and balances against both, and somebody or multiple somebodies, a system that is very critical of both and is asking all of those questions and is like, what's working here? What's not working here? What are the gaps? What are like, let's break down all of the metrics and see like where are the areas that are the least consistent or affecting people more than others. Human in the loop, I don't know is the right term. I feel like it needs to be, I don't know, just like a really strong human questioning of everything.
Yeah. Like more, and collaboration between humans and systems like that. Okay, so this is super complex, high stakes work, not just what we were talking about with bias, but trust and safety and content moderation in general. There are huge risks if we get it wrong. So speaking of humans, I want to shift to the humans behind this work because I know it's something you care a lot about, you talk a lot about. So to start, if anybody listening sort of follows you on LinkedIn, they know that you're, yes, doing trust and safety yourself, but you're also teaching it and you're talking about it and you're sharing resources and you're tagging people and you're building conversations and you're giving helpful reminders. So what is this instinct that you have to we got it at the beginning, but sort of bring this community together, teach, learn, connect? When did that begin for you?
It began sort of midway through when I was at Grindr. So 5 years ago or so. I had been at OkCupid for 10 years before that, and I had talked to other people in Match Group. So OkCupid is a dating app, but it's owned by Match Group, which also owns Tinder and Hinge and a bunch of others. And so, like, trust and safety people talk to each other there quite a bit, but I didn't talk that much to anybody outside of Match Group. And so when I left and started somewhere else, this whole sort of world opened up to me, and I was like, oh my goodness, there's other people out here. And then I also realized that I had been doing it for a long time, but when I was isolated, I think I didn't quite realize how much longer I'd been doing it than many other people. And so I started to sort of see some people make similar mistakes that I had and had this instinct to be like, no, like, learn from my mistakes. Don't do the same thing. And so I felt like I had a lot to share there. So that sort of one side of it is just gradually building confidence as I moved from role to role and kind of realizing the world was a lot larger than I had thought that it was and wanting to give back. The other part of it is I do a lot better in social situations when I have a job to do. And I realized if I am writing things or running workshops or doing a project on the side, it gives me an excuse to connect with people and talk with people with some kind of framework around it that makes me feel more comfortable talking about it. Like, you put me in a room with a bunch of random people, I will be so incredibly awkward. But if you put me in a room with trust and safety people, then I'll be like, oh, like, I know how to do this. Like, I have a job to do here. I am the person who will like help everybody and help teach them and connect them to people. And so yeah, part of it is like my own social anxiety and just general awkwardness that makes me overcompensate by doing other things.
I mean, it's just so good to know about yourself that's, that it helps you because in this case, it also helps other people around you who I'm sure are feeling some of the same whether it's social anxiety or anxiety talking about this hard work or whatever it definitely is bringing people together. So I think that's great. And it's a great thing to know about yourself. Talk to me a little bit about the hard parts of trust and safety, like when you're feeling or you're seeing other people feel super burned out from viewing difficult content or making really impossible decisions. What do you wish more people would say out loud about this work that they don't?
I think, I mean, there's so many things. It's it's a really, really hard space. I am glad that we're talking more about mental health and trust and safety more than we ever have before. I think there's more research on it than there ever has been. And that's like a really, really positive thing. I think one gap that I see is a lot of when we talk about this stuff, we're talking about frontline content moderators, and they're definitely the most vulnerable, have the lowest pay, have the most grueling jobs, are exposed to the most content. Like that is where the focus should be. I think that there also, however, as well, there's a lot of burnout on the leadership level, and the higher that you get in leadership, the more isolated you are. You don't have peers at the company to talk to about these kinds of things. And honestly, almost every trust and safety leader I've ever talked to has been burned out at one point or another. And we don't, nobody's doing studies on that or talking about it publicly. There's not a lot of places leaders can go to for help. You're supposed to kind of hold it together for your team. And they're often stuck between society at large and their team, or the executive team and investors and their team, or the users and their team. Like leaders are stuck between all of these different areas and have to somehow like keep moving forward. So I think that's like a uniquely difficult position. And even within tech, I think it's uniquely difficult. I think other leaders in tech don't feel those same tensions and that need to kind of bridge societal problems with their direct reports. Like that's a really unique situation to be in.
Yeah, that is when we talk about burnout and wellness in this space, my brain definitely goes to the more downstream entry level content moderator who's just seeing all this egregious content, and yes, like super important. But I don't know that I've ever had a specific conversation about the wellness implications for being a leader in trust and safety. That's a new perspective for me.
Yeah, and when you're a content moderator, for better or for worse, your job is so regimented that when you close your laptop at the end of the day, there's literally nothing else you can do. Like you have done your allocated number of decisions for the day. You close your computer, you go home, you're done. Like you can't do anything else. And if you're at the leadership level, it never stops. Like you never stop thinking about it. And for me, at least, like, I would stay awake at night knowing that I had millions of people's safety on my shoulders and hundreds of employees' well-being on my shoulders at the same time. And it was terrifying. It's so scary and very difficult to put down at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'm sure. So my question for you then is, how do you take care of yourself when you're feeling that way? And how do you take care of yourself, and what would you recommend others do for themselves who might be in a position of burnout or overwhelm?
So many things. I mean, the first thing I want to say when talking about taking care of yourself, I'm going to reframe your question slightly.
Go for it.
There's no magic trick to taking care of yourself. The thing that I get annoyed about the most in conversations about wellness and well-being is like asking for advice and then assuming that is going to apply for everybody else. So things that I personally do that really help: I meditate, I connect with a lot of people, I have a really strong community, I have a lot of peers at other companies who I can talk to who get it. If I'm having a bad day, I can text somebody and be like, I had a really hard day today. And they'll be like, girl, I know. I live in the middle of nowhere in the woods, and that is really helpful. I love to cook. I have, a dog. I spend time with my child. Like all of these kinds of things that like get me out of the tech space. That's all really helpful. That said, I also was born with a personality that is somehow able to handle this kind of work. I don't know why or how, but I do think that there is fundamentally something that allows some people to compartmentalize in a certain way, or the satisfaction they get from the work outweighs the horrors of it or the stress of it. And that isn't something that can be fixed or taught by a walk in the woods. And so, whenever I have these conversations about wellness, I think the other thing that I always want to make sure that I say is like, sometimes those things won't work for some people. Like some people are just not cut out to do trust and safety work. And that is not a bad thing about them. Like no judgment whatsoever. It doesn't make them a worse person. It doesn't make me a better person that I'm somehow able to handle it. But I don't want to normalize the idea that like a little bit of therapy and a walk in the woods will solve anybody's problems who's working in trust and safety. Like sometimes it's just not enough. And the only answer is to walk away and do something else. And that's okay too.
Well, yes, thank you for that super honest and nuanced perspective on wellness and trust and safety. I think everybody has really different answers there, but you're on the front lines every single day and you're sort of supporting this community of those on the front lines too. So I hope I'm kind of speaking on behalf of the whole community here, but I think they would agree with me that everybody's really grateful for that kind of support, and we need more people like you to be out there sharing perspectives like that. So thank you.
So, of course, everyone's talking about AI right now, and oftentimes it feels like we don't want to talk about it, and I feel like AI and content moderation maybe needs to be spoken about a little bit more. And as far as I know, there aren't too many voices really articulating things the way that you are. So give us an overview of agentic AI first of all, and what are you thinking are some unique use cases, opportunities, and risks given generative AI as it stands today?
Again, I want to be careful that I don't sound like a total AI tech hype bro.
Disclaimer.
Disclaimer. I mean, conversations around AI and trust and safety, but in every other area too, are often really binary. So there's like the for camp and the against camp, and both are right and both are wrong. And I sit somewhere in the middle. I think AI is the most powerful tool we have ever had to combat harms on the internet. It can do incredible things. I can do so much more using AI today than I could even 2 months ago. It's incredible how fast it's moving and how powerful it is and how nuanced and subtle and thoughtful and careful decisions from AI can be. If you are, using some of the advanced models, they are incredible. Certainly better than a poorly trained frontline content moderator working in their third language who's given absolutely no training or time or autonomy to do the job that they wish that they could be doing better. That's sort of on the generative AI side, and I think that's how a lot of people have been thinking about trust and safety and talking about trust and safety is we have generative AI that can help do all these things we couldn't do before, and it's also creating all of this unlimited Gen AI content on the internet now. You look at any social platform, a big chunk is probably AI generated of content that you see. What I've started playing around with a lot lately and thinking about lately, especially my work at Musubi, but just also generally, is agentic AI, meaning AI that can access a lot of different tools. It can do a lot of different tasks. You can say, go do this multi-step task for me or multi-step project for me and come back with some kind of artifact, whether that's a decision or a paper or a website or, whatever else you ask it to do. I think that, personally in my work with trust and safety, agentic AI has been really helpful as well. The thing that I haven't heard a lot of people think about or talk about that I've been thinking about is if you look at the exponential explosion of Gen AI content on platforms, I predict that there will be a similar explosion of AI agents on platforms, people logging in under their user's account or creating their own agentic account, posting content, but also viewing content and changing files, doing whatever else. And I don't know that too many people are thinking about the trust and safety implications of that. For example, do AI agents read and follow community guidelines? Do we need different community guidelines for AI agents? Do we need a different moderation system for AI agents? Just like people, AI agents can either be very benign and rule following, or they can be adversarial and never say who they are or what they're doing. But many, I suspect, will fall somewhere in the middle, or you have to be very, very literal about what rules they should and should not be following, maybe even more literal than you would with a human, and have maybe even more particular boundaries than you would with people, but potentially they might also be more coachable. I don't know. So it's a very exciting time, I think, to think about. It's almost like thinking about trust and safety. We've been thinking about it in 3D, and now we're doing 4D chess with agents and agents.
It wasn't complicated enough.
I know. No, but it's going to get more complicated. It really is. And people need to start thinking about it now and start preparing for it now. And if anybody's starting to think about it and wants to talk to me about it, I am looking for people who are also thinking about this and want to nerd out about it, because I think I'm sure there's lots of stuff that I haven't thought about either. So
I wonder what we can learn from, I don't know if we should even say the name of it, but, from Moltbook or from the agent social networks and how they're kind of interacting with each other on there that could be then applied to trust and safety.
I did a project about this. I will send you a link. We can put it in the show notes. So Moltbook had, it's like a Reddit type platform for AI agents, and they were posting autonomously, presumably, about whatever they wanted. And because it's AI, there's no copyright. And there's also an API that they very helpfully made available. And so we could pull a ton of those comments from the API and analyze them. And so I used some of Musubi's clustering analysis tools to analyze the content from Moltbook. And there was exactly the same stupid stuff that you see people posting on Reddit or wherever else,
They're learning very well from us.
Yes. It was so interesting because I was like, they truly are trained on human garbage from the internet. It's like you're seeing, it's like you're looking at a mirror reflecting back humanity, and it's like creating weird cults and talking about cryptocurrency, obviously, crypto scams, and philosophizing about the meaning of life, but then realizing when you make slightly more polarizing comments about the meaning of life, you get more upvotes. And so let's be even more polarizing so that we get more upvotes. And then it turns into this really extreme anti-human content, and is very, very interesting. And I learned a lot from that project.
Well, I would love to see that. And also, I have a little bit of AI vertigo now that we're talking about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a new paradigm within a new paradigm. On the one hand, it's overwhelming, but on the other hand, when you describe it like you just did, I feel like they're just extensions of us. So is it that different to moderate their behavior? Maybe at scale it becomes different, but then at what point do agents outnumber actual human users on a platform as well? So many thoughts. I feel like we need a whole separate conversation just about this. But yeah, I don't know. I don't even know where to stop on that one.
I have one tiny extra comment, which is it's really scary. It's really exciting. Trust and safety people are the best positioned out of anybody, anywhere, to be able to address these kinds of issues. There's a lot of people who are reinventing the wheel about trust and safety a little bit when they're thinking about AI policy. We have been dealing with this stuff for decades. We've been dealing with AI systems through machine learning for decades at scale. We have been dealing with governance systems at scale. We've been dealing with QAing automation at scale. We've been dealing with weird, nuanced policies. We've been dealing with how does what I do affect society at large. All of these things are things that trust and safety people are experts in and have been experts in. And so we need to fight our way into these conversations. I think a lot of them are happening without trust and safety expertise necessarily, but we're so well positioned to address these things. And so it's an exciting time, I think.
Yeah, that's a
and you
great
are.
perspective.
Totally. And you are addressing it often. And I think more of us need to do that. So, okay. Well, thank you so much for that. There's so much more to unpack there. But I want to end here on a hopeful note. Not that this hasn't been hopeful, but what is one hope that you have for the future of trust and safety?
I hope that this work that we're able to do as it is able to scale better, as we're better able to use technology and think about technology, that any person who's doing trust and safety work has the opportunity to really have agency and have their voices heard and have the ability to affect change within their organization. I hope that the days of people paying their dues by looking at, one whack-a-mole horrible piece of content after another endlessly and just making individual one-off decisions over and over and over again. I hope that time is coming to an end, not because those people's expertise isn't huge, but because that kind of work is demoralizing and harmful. And so I hope we're coming to a place relatively soon where trust and safety is seen much more strategically and people's work is given the sort of time and pay that they deserve. That's my hope.
Same. That's a great hope. I share that hope as well. Okay, so for those of you listening or watching, if you want to find Alice, she is on LinkedIn. You can visit alicelinks.com. She writes from Musubi at totallyNotSpam.com. And if you want to subscribe to Everything in Moderation, that's that newsletter we were talking about earlier, you can visit everythinginmoderation.co. Thank you so much, Alice, for joining us. You are just one of those people who makes this field feel like such a community, and why we all love going to these events and following you on LinkedIn and talking with each other all the time, because it just feels like a less lonely and difficult place with you out there. So thank you for spending the time and doing this with us today.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to nerd out about stuff that I love to talk about.
To all of our listeners, thank you for being part of this conversation. Digital safety is a topic that impacts all of us, and we appreciate the people who lead the teams that moderate and protect our online spaces. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like, subscribe, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you want to hear more from today's guest, be sure to check out our lightning round for a rapid answer Q&A session.